Mr John Penrose.
Dame Rosie, many thanks. I think I should probably start by formally making sure that I've said that I beg to move that clauses 1 to 4 stand part of the bill, on the grounds that if I don't say that, then probably bad things happen and we don't get to the important part of the proceedings at the end of it. I will begin, if I can, with the 4 amendments raised by my right honourable friend, the former Attorney General for, I can't remember, it was Beckenham. No, not Beckenham, Beaconsfield, thank you. These would require a first progress report under clause 3 of the bill to be made on the 4th of September, not the 21st of October. As he mentioned, fortnightly reports would then be required from the 9th of October until the 18th of December if an executive had not been formed. Any report under clause 3 or any regulations under clause 2 would be subject to an approval motion in this House and a take note motion at the other end of the corridor. Now, Dame Rosie, the Government agrees that Parliament must be kept closely informed on progress towards restoring an executive in Northern Ireland, and that is precisely what Clause 3 provides for. And we are willing to consider or accept various other reporting obligations, as I've made clear in the earlier group of amendments, and that goodwill and positive approach I aim to continue in the second grouping of amendments as well. So, given the fundamental importance of these issues, I'm very happy to confirm that we will accept my right honourable friend's amendment number 14, which is the progress report to Parliament on or before the 4th of September. I will, however, have to disagree with him and oppose the other amendments which he's tabled, just simply that the requirement for regular fortnightly reporting throughout the autumn, subject to a vote on each occasion, is an excessive and unnecessary level of procedure. And I would also note that the requirement for fortnightly reports and motions would attach to many of the other reporting obligations on the other different topics which have been attached to this bill, which the various honourable colleagues are seeking to add to this clause, and therefore the amount of parliamentary time which we would be booking up throughout September and on into the autumn, should the executive in Stormont not have been created, would start to mount. So therefore I appreciate that what lies behind my right honourable friend's amendments is not solely a concern to keep abreast of the progress towards restoring devolved government in Northern Ireland. He was very, very clear that his interests are a great deal broader than that and are primarily motivated by concerns about Brexit. So we will happily accept new clause 14, but I hope he will understand, for the reasons that I have laid out, that we are not minded to accept his other 3 amendments on that, and I hope that he will withdraw them when he's had a chance to consider those remarks. I will now move on to amendments 6 and 7 in the name of my honourable and right honourable friends from Lewisham and New Forest East about veterans. And I should thank them for those amendments. There's broad agreement, I think, after a couple of different UQs and a couple of different debates in both Westminster Hall and here over the course of the last month, that the current legacy system is just not working well for pretty much anyone. It has to change, it has to provide better outcomes and ensure that everyone, particularly the armed forces and police officers, is treated fairly. The draft bill that we consulted on last year would require a new body investigating legacy cases to do so in a fair, balanced and proportionate manner. And Dame Rosie, we have just finished consulting and have published the responses in the last week. Interestingly, there were strong and widespread views against either an amnesty or immunity from prosecution, and both right honourable gentlemen, in moving their amendments, were very keen, and rightly so, to make clear the difference between those 2 proposals and the ideas that they are putting forward today. But that was reflected very, very strongly in the responses to the consultation. But there's also widespread concern about former soldiers being pursued by vexatious and unfair court cases 50 or 40 more years later after they finished serving. These amendments would require the Secretary of State to report on progress towards introducing a presumption of non-prosecution, and the Attorney General for Northern Ireland producing guidance for legacy cases with a presumption in favour of prosecution in cases where a weapon had been unlawfully obtained, which I think is a very worthy attempt to try and make a distinction and to unravel the tendency, in some cases unwanted, towards people trying to create moral equivalence between terrorists and Her Majesty's armed forces. Now, it's important to be clear that the specifics of these particular or associated issues which are being proposed here did not actually form part of the Stormont House Agreement and were not, in fact, recommended or supported widely in the responses to the recent consultation either. There are some other technical concerns about whether or not the UK Government can direct the Attorney-General of Northern Ireland as well, which I think is problematic. But in principle, Dame Rosie, the point is this. I intend to take these two amendments in the spirit which I think that they were intended. I think that they are intended to move for, as a valid and sincere attempt to move this issue forward. It is time and past time that a solution was found to this issue, and whether or not the precise details of their specific proposals are approved of in all their details in the report, or only approved of in part, and other things may be brought forward instead, I think is beside the point on this case. The important thing is this report, or these two reports, could serve as a way to advance that cause, to identify solutions and to move this forward, and it is overdue that we do so, and I am delighted to support both amendments. I now move on to the points about the Armed Forces Covenant, which we've heard several honourable and right honourable members, particularly from the Northern Ireland benches opposite, speaking to eloquently and with great passion. I'm grateful to them for this is new clauses 15 and 16 and Amendment 18. Now, the Armed Forces Covenant, as we've heard, is hardly a new policy and has always extended in principle to Northern Ireland, and we continue to need to strengthen the delivery of the Covenant in Northern Ireland. We have heard some very concerning, in fact sometimes shocking examples during the course of today about occasions when it could have been applied and has not been and should have been. So the principle of the Covenant was formalised in the 2011 Armed Forces Act. In accordance with the Act, the Secretary of State of Defence is legally obliged to publish an annual report which sets out the key deliverables under the Covenant. This report incorporates progress in delivering the Covenant across the whole of the UK, including Northern Ireland, and we also ensure Covenant delivery is kept on track through a number of committees and boards. We have consistently, everyone in this House, certainly this Government and our DUP competence and supply partners, have consistently demonstrated commitment to upholding the principles and the universality of the Covenant, which is evident in the work reported in each of the annual reports laid in the House. We will continue to report progress to Parliament, and we recognise our commitment to our confidence and supply partners to have full implementation of the Armed Forces Covenant across the UK, and we are committed to looking at further legislation if that is required. Turning to the amendments regarding the definition of a victim in the name of the Right Honourable Member for Belfast North, that's Amendments 19 and new clause 18. The definition of a victim is laid down in legislation. It's the Victim and Survivors Northern Ireland Order 2006, which is the responsibility of the Northern Ireland Assembly. As a devolved matter, any change to this definition would need to be agreed with the parties in the Executive and ultimately by the Northern Ireland Assembly. Can I just finish this sentence and then I'll happily go? Now, Dame Rosie, the Government recognises that the definition of a victim is something that a number of honourable and right honourable members have campaigned for a number of years, and we commit to looking UK-wide at how we can make sure the victims are duly recognised and protected in law. I hope that with this commitment and the one I made previously, the right honourable gentleman be willing to withdraw his amendment, but I will happily take the amendment, the intervention that has just been proposed.
For giving way. I think it's very important to highlight just what I believe is not an accurate description of the current legal position. The 2006 order refers only to matters pertaining to the Commissioner for Victims and Survivors in Northern Ireland. There is no general definition of victim, and our argument is that actually a victim in Northern Ireland is the same as a victim across the United Kingdom. Sadly, there are many victims of terrorism across the United Kingdom, and this should rightly be a matter for the British Government to be legislated on here.
And I hope, Dame Rosie, that the commitments which I've just made and the words I've just been able to produce will have reassured them, and that therefore they will be willing to withdraw their amendments on that basis, because I think that we are in agreement on this, but I'm sure that they will intervene if not. Can I finally, Dame Rosie, turn to the two amendments tabled or moved very, very briefly and eloquently by my honourable friend from Congleton late in our proceedings. Those are Amendments 21 and Amendments 22. They are asking for reports back on gambling and progress towards looking after victims of people who are addicts of gambling, and also people who are victims of human trafficking. On the basis that we have been willing to look at other reports as well, I, of course, am very willing to respond to that, and will be very, very willing to accept those two amendments which has been put forward by my honourable friend from Congleton. And therefore, Dame Eleanor, rather than Dame Rosie, I hope that we have managed to dispose of these different amendments in reasonably good order. I also hope that everybody will be willing to treat the government's approach to those various different amendments in as constructive and positive method as possible, and that therefore we will be able, if we possibly can, to dispose of the remaining business of this section of the bill's passage easily and straightforwardly. I therefore wish to do something quite unusual for a politician, and to draw my remarks to a close, stop talking and sit down.
Oh, very good. I thank the Minister. The question is that Clause 1 stand part of the bill. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that Clause 2 stand part of the bill. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to Amendment 14 to Clause 3. Mr. Grieve to move formally. The question is that Amendment 14 be made. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to Amendment 6 to Clause 3. Dr. Lewis to move formally.
Formally.
The question is that Amendment 6 be made. As many as that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No. Aye.
Division, clear the lobby.